Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we are looking at a highly structured case study on data mining methodologies. If you're the kind of learner who appreciates absolute clarity and a real step-by-step approach to complex systems, well, you are in the exact right place. Think of this not just as an academic review of concepts, but as a critical mission briefing for tackling massive datasets and extracting absolute gold. We've got a clear objective, a designated toolkit, and a very precise map for implementation. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our mission blueprint for today. We'll be working through 5 distinct stages: objective, real-life solutions, the data mining toolkit, self-learning, multimedia mining, stages of implementation, and finally, interpreting and validating results. All right, let's start with our very first section, objective, real-life solutions, or as I like to call it for this operation, setting the target. So how do we actually solve real-life problems with data? I mean, that's the ultimate question we're trying to answer here, isn't it? The primary learning objective laid out in our case study is to identify the various data mining techniques used for mining different data sets. But, it's absolutely vital to remember why we're doing this. We aren't just categorizing techniques for the sake of a textbook exercise. As the Foundational Learning Outcome, or LO 6.1, states, the real goal is to take these techniques and apply them directly to solve tangible, real-world problems. Because at the end of the day, the data is really only as good as the solution it provides. Moving right along to our next section, the data mining toolkit. Consider this your arsenal for the mission. The contents of this case study are essentially an inventory list. They outline the exact specific tools you're going to need to successfully pull off this data extraction operation. Because let's face it, when you're staring down an overwhelming mountain of information, having the right specialized tool is literally the only way to separate the signal from the noise. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer variety and specialization within our arsenal. We've got web content mining, web structure mining, and web usage mining. That's 3 completely different ways to slice and understand data from the internet. Whether you're looking at the content itself, how that content is linked together, or how users are actually interacting with it. Then we step away from the web entirely with spatial mining, which tackles space-based or geographical datasets. And finally, text mining to extract high-quality information straight from written language. Each one of these 5 core techniques is precision engineered for a very specific type of data extraction. Now for Section 3, self-learning, multimedia mining. This right here represents your solo mission. And this brilliantly illustrates a really interesting divide in our educational parameters today. On the one hand, we have the core methodologies we just went over, the web, spatial, and text mining techniques that form the bulk of our primary toolkit. But then you have this independent mission parameter, multimedia data mining. The source material intentionally categorizes this as a self-learning topic. It challenges you, the learner, to independently figure out how to extract patterns from incredibly rich, complex datasets like audio, video, and images, essentially pushing you way beyond the standard toolkit. Let's transition over to Section 4, Stages of Implementation, which is all about executing the plan. Okay, this is where we put the tools to work. The execution phase is based on 4 highly specific, chronological learning outcomes from our source. First, you'll identify the various techniques required to solve that real-life problem. Second, you gotta identify the functionalities and computing resources you need to actually find the solution. Third, your mission is to actively implement the data mining stages. And fourth, you must interpret and validate the results. All of this builds into a very precise, step-by-step execution matrix. I absolutely love this part, because these academic performance indicators, or PIs, they honestly read exactly like encrypted spy movie coordinates. For instance, Learning Outcome 6.1. Identifying techniques. Well, that targets coordinates PI 2.1.2 and 8.2.1. Locating your computing resources in LO 6.2, that maps directly to PI 2.2.2. When you implement the stages in LO 6.3, you're hitting targets 3.4.2 and 9.1.1. And finally, validating those results in LO 6.4 triangulates precisely at coordinates 3.4.3, 8.3.1, and 9.2.2. It adds a bit of fun to the process, for sure, but practically speaking, it provides a completely locked-in, heavily structured roadmap for your academic execution. That brings us to our final section, interpreting and validating results, otherwise known as proving mission success. So the crucial point is this: just pulling the data isn't enough to call it a day. Learning Outcomes 6.4 specifically states that you must interpret and validate the results of your case study using different evaluation techniques. If you just scrape a bunch of data, run a process, and throw the raw numbers at a wall, you haven't actually solved the real-life problem. You have to rigorously evaluate those outcomes to ensure they mean something in the real world. Simply put, validation equals proof. Employing different evaluation techniques serves as the ultimate proof of success for this entire methodology case study. It's the final, non-negotiable stamp of approval that your web, spatial, text, or even your self-learned multimedia data mining efforts actually yielded an accurate, applicable solution to your target problem. Without validation, you just have a pile of data. But with validation, you have a verified solution. Which brings us to the end of our briefing, leaving you with one final, vital question. Are you ready to implement these stages to find your own solutions? You have the objective to solve real-life problems. You have the specialized toolkit, ranging from web to text mining, and you have the exact coordinate map for implementation and validation. The blueprint is now completely in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay focused and happy mining.